Richard I of England, better known as Richard the Lionheart, reigned from 1189 until his death in 1199. His reign was short but immensely impactful, filled with military campaigns, both heroic and controversial, and significant developments that would shape the English monarchy for centuries. Richard earned his nickname Lionheart due to his legendary courage and leadership in battle, especially during the Third Crusade. Despite his fame, Richard's reign in England itself was relatively brief, as he spent much of his time abroad, primarily engaged in the affairs of the Crusades and managing his lands in France. His absence from England, combined with the challenges posed by his brother John and the complex political situation in Europe, means that Richard's legacy is one of both heroism and missed opportunities. Richard was born on September 8, 1157, at Beaumont Palace in Oxford, the third son of Henry II of England and Eleanor of Aquitaine. His early life was marked by the complex and often turbulent politics of his family. His father, Henry II, ruled a vast empire stretching across England and large parts of France, while his mother, Eleanor, was a powerful and influential queen who had been previously married to the King of France. From a young age, Richard was trained to be a ruler, though he was not initially expected to inherit the throne, as his older brothers, Henry the young king, Geoffrey, and John, were in line before him. Richard's relationship with his father was strained, as Henry II had a reputation for autocratic rule and a contentious relationship with his sons. The conflict between Richard and his father came to a head in the 1170s, when Richard joined his brothers in rebellion against their father, hoping to carve out his own kingdom within the Angevin Empire. The rebellion ultimately failed, but it led to Henry II agreeing to give Richard control over the Duchy of Aquitaine and other lands in France. When Richard's older brother Henry died in 1183, Richard was next in line to inherit the English throne. Upon the death of his father, Henry II, in 1189, Richard ascended to the throne of England. But his succession was complicated by the ambitions of his younger brother John, who sought the throne for himself. Richard is perhaps best remembered for his involvement in the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, a military campaign aimed at reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim control. The crusade was launched after the fall of Jerusalem in 1187 to the forces of the Muslim leader Saladin, and it became one of the most famous military endeavors of the medieval period. Richard, along with other European monarchs, including King Philip II of France and Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire, responded to Pope Gregory VIII's call for a new crusade. Richard's leadership during the crusade was one of his defining characteristics, earning him the epithet Lionheart for his bravery, military acumen, and determination in battle. However, despite his legendary status, the Third Crusade was ultimately unable to retake Jerusalem, and Richard was forced to negotiate with Saladin for the safety of Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy City. Richard's first major military engagement on the crusade was the siege of Acre in 1191. After months of siege, Acre fell to the Crusaders, but the conflict highlighted Richard's determination and ruthless leadership. He made a famous decision to execute 2,700 Muslim prisoners after they were captured during the siege, a decision that outraged some of his contemporaries, but demonstrated his resolve in the face of adversity. After the capture of Acre, Richard and Philip II of France sought to march on Jerusalem, but tensions between the two monarchs prevented a unified approach. Richard's relationship with Philip deteriorated, and the two kings parted ways in 1191, with Richard remaining in the Holy Land while Philip returned to France. Richard continued his military campaigns against Saladin, winning a series of victories, including the Battle of Arsuf in 1191, which cemented his reputation as a skilled and fearless military leader. However, despite these successes, Richard was unable to capture Jerusalem itself, and by 1192 he was forced to negotiate a truce with Saladin, which allowed Christians access to the Holy City. The Third Crusade was a mixed success. While it failed to achieve its ultimate goal of recapturing Jerusalem, it did secure important concessions for Christians in the Holy Land, such as the right to pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Richard's military achievements during the Crusade, his charismatic leadership, and his diplomatic efforts with Saladin made him one of the most celebrated monarchs of the medieval period. His role in the Crusade also solidified his legacy as a warrior king, and his name became synonymous with chivalric ideals and knightly virtues. While Richard's military exploits during the Crusade were legendary, his time in England itself was limited. Richard spent only a small fraction of his reign in England, just a few months out of the 10 years he ruled. This absence led to difficulties in governance and contributed to the instability of his reign in the kingdom he was supposed to rule. Upon his coronation, Richard left England in the hands of trusted advisors, notably William Longchamp, the Bishop of Ely, and his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Richard also appointed his brother John as the ruler of a large part of England during his absence, a decision that would later prove problematic. John, who had long harbored ambitions of his own, saw Richard's absence as an opportunity to further his claim to power. This tension between the two brothers would lead to lasting animosity and contribute to John's eventual rebellion against Richard's successor, his nephew Henry III. Richard's lack of presence in England was exacerbated by the high taxes he levied to fund his crusade and military campaigns in France. These financial demands were met with resistance from the English nobility and the church, who were burdened by the king's need for funds. Richard's attempts to raise money for his military ventures, including the sale of royal offices and the imposition of heavy taxes on the populace, alienated many of his subjects. Despite this, Richard's fame as a warrior and his success in the Crusades largely overshadowed any dissatisfaction with his domestic governance. Richard's relationship with his brother John, who was often left in charge of England during Richard's absences, was one of the most enduring aspects of his reign. John, who would later become King John, was known for his treachery and ambition. While Richard was away fighting in the Holy Land, John attempted to seize power in England, aligning himself with rebel barons and even negotiating with King Philip II of France. John's actions led to a breakdown in the relationship between the two brothers, and Richard's later years were marked by efforts to reassert his authority over his younger sibling. Richard's family dynamics were further complicated by his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor, a powerful and politically astute figure in her own right, had been an influential advisor during Richard's reign. However, she also had to navigate the tensions between Richard and John, as well as the ongoing challenges of managing the vast Angevin Empire, which stretched across both England and much of France. Richard's family issues, coupled with his absence from England, would play a key role in the challenges that his successors would face, particularly when John ascended to the throne. John's rebellion against his brother's legacy, including his failure to maintain the lands Richard had secured in France, contributed to the eventual loss of much of the Angevin Empire. Despite his limited time in England and the challenges he faced in governance, Richard the Lionheart's legacy as a military leader and a symbol of medieval chivalry endures. His participation in the Third Crusade elevated his status to that of a European hero, and his martial prowess made him a paragon of knightly virtues. The nickname Lionheart itself has become synonymous with bravery, strength, and the ideals of chivalry. Richard's reign also marked a significant turning point in the history of the English monarchy. His absence from England exposed the vulnerabilities of the monarchy and the fragility of royal authority in a feudal system. While his military achievements were significant, his reign left a kingdom in need of leadership and stability. This gap in governance ultimately paved the way for his brother John to inherit the throne, a reign that would be marked by failure and rebellion, most notably culminating in the signing of the Magna Carta. King Richard I's reign was marked by a series of military exploits, personal challenges, and an enduring legacy that overshadowed his relatively brief time in England. While he was absent from his kingdom for much of his reign, Richard the Lionheart's military campaigns, particularly his role in the Third Crusade, cemented his place as one of the most iconic figures of the medieval period. His valor, courage, and chivalric ideals continue to capture the imagination, but his reign also highlighted the complexities of medieval kingship, especially when it came to balancing military ambition with the needs of domestic governance. Ultimately, Richard's legacy is one of paradoxes, a king celebrated for his heroic qualities but criticized for his neglect of his kingdom, a symbol of medieval chivalry who struggled with the realities of political power. His reign marked the high point of the Angevin Empire, but his absence, family tensions, and lack of attention to domestic matters contributed to the instability that would follow his death, particularly for his brother John, whose reign would mark the decline of the empire Richard had fought so hard to build.